My name's Rory. I'm from the UK. I'm one of the senior coaches and managers of Rising Stars Cheerleading, and we're based out of Manchester. So a little bit of background about me. I work for Rising Stars. I also work for the British Cheerleading Association as a coach, trainer and educator. I own and operate Triforce Cheer, which is a strength and conditioning platform specifically aimed at cheerleaders. I'm also a freelance consultant coach up and down the UK. I've been coaching for 6 years now. I've been an athlete for 10. I've competed at Worlds, I've coached teams to Worlds, and I always like to show off my favourite achievement, which is the team I coach is the 2019 bronze medalist in the International Open 5 division. That was Rising Stars Ellipse. Anyway, moving swiftly on. So thank you for coming to my talk, and thank you, Kenny and Lisa, for the vote of confidence, as this is my first time working with the guys at Spring. So I hope you enjoyed today's talk. We're going to be talking about strength and conditioning in cheerleading, and what we're going to be talking about is why athlete development, COVID and the Olympics mean that we need strength and conditioning now more than we ever have before. It's always been an aspect of my life, strength conditioning and exercise. I've trained as a fitness instructor, a personal trainer, and now a strength conditioning coach. And I feel like it's very important that the cheerleading industry gets on board with using strength conditioning in a more meaningful manner in order to make better athletes, a better sport, and a more competitive sport. Anyway, let's jump straight in. So first, what is strength and conditioning? So it is sports science being used to improve athletic performance, how athletes move, how we systemize training, how we basically make the most out of what we've got and improve that in a long-term and programmed and logical manner. So sports science is everything from cardiovascular fitness through to muscular strength, through to force curves, etc, etc. I won't bore you with the science, okay? Moving well, everyone wants to move well. No one wants a bad back, dodgy shoulders, ankles that are broken or twisted, or recurring injuries. Strength conditioning can help alleviate injuries, but it can also help reduce the incidence of them, okay? We can't prevent injuries, at least I don't think we can, but we can reduce the incidence of them if we're smart with our training, our programming, we'll cover more of that in a second, and the way we use strength and conditioning. Improving athletes' performance is a #1 priority for almost every sport worldwide. Why wouldn't it be? You want to be the best, you want to be better than you are now, so why would you not use every single tool at your disposal? Now, a lot of people will say they don't understand strength and conditioning, they don't know how to use it, and that's fine. When you've not got a particularly good choreography head on your shoulders, you bring in a choreographer. When you aren't great at coaching tumble, you bring in a tumble coach. So why would we not do the same for strength conditioning, for exercise, for fitness, for getting the most out of our athletes in a field that we don't feel confident with? And finally, systemised training. Systemised training refers to something called periodisation, which we'll cover in the next slide. Periodisation and programming are two principles that go hand in hand in strength and conditioning in order to logically plan. We do that for our sessions already. We plan for our off-season. We plan for in-season, choreo season, competition season, Worlds month. These are all things we already use. We just don't use different terminology for them. So systemised training just refers to that, a logical plan, a long-term plan for how you're going to get your athletes to their peak performance. Now, periodisation. So, periodisation, like I've already said, is the long-term planning of strength conditioning in order to optimise the results. This doesn't just include exercise, it includes rest and recovery as well. Without rest and recovery coaches, we don't get the principles we're going to talk about later on. We don't get any changes in the body. The changes occur through recovery. So you can't expect to hammer your athletes all the time and get the best out of them, okay? We should know that already. Now, what we've got here is a classic example of periodisation. A macrocycle is the big picture. The mesocycles are the smaller building blocks that create the macrocycle. And the microcycles in yellow, I'm not sure you can see the writing, they create the mesocycles. So we break it down quite far. Now, the reason why I'm referencing the Olympics here is the Olympics, other than what we've got coming up next in Paris because of COVID, and because of the Olympics we've just had, because of COVID. The Olympics is a 4-year block. So that would be our macro cycle, our 4-year block. Then our mesocycles would be the years, okay? And our microcycles would be maybe 3-month periods within those years. The reason why we use macro, meso and micro, again, you don't need to worry about the words, is because it allows us to specifically plan for separate sections, okay? So maybe in each microcycle, we will plan to get stronger in a squat movement or a hinge movement, or be able to do a certain number of reps, or be able to run for a certain amount of time. And then the aim of the mesocycle would maybe be to perform a routine to a certain quality or a certain degree. And of course, the goal of the macro cycle would be to perform at the Olympics. Does this sound familiar, coaches? I hope it does, because you already do it. You have an off season, you have a comp season, you have a choreo season. Like I've already mentioned, we already have periodization in cheerleading. We just don't call it that. So it's something we can pick up on and enhance cheerleading with, without having to reinvent the wheel, coaches, okay? So again, that's macro cycle, big picture, that would be our season. Mesocycle would maybe be comp season, choreo season, off season, 3-month periods within. Worlds, the run up to Worlds. And the microcycles would maybe be the individual months or weeks, how you plan exercises, training sessions, tumble sessions, choreo, okay? All those little things come together to create a periodization plan. Now, of course, nobody ever got to the Olympics without a plan, and our sport has now received full recognition, and if you didn't know that, you've probably been under a stone for quite a while. In fact, a very long time. So why would we not start taking advantage of it now in a big and meaningful manner if we haven't already? Okay, so if you have, great, hit me up in the comments, talk to me, engage with me. You'll find all my social media channels, limited as they are, just like my ability to use them. But communicate with me, talk. I'd love to learn and know about what you're doing, okay? The Olympics plan specifically for those 4-year blocks. Soon, we're going to need to do that as well. So why would we not start doing it now and set our athletes up for success? Long-term athletic development, which is towards the end of our presentation, is the idea that we start young to set them up for future success by not having an unhealthy relationship with strength, conditioning and exercise. But more on that later. So, what are the key principles of strength conditioning? You may already know. I have done a crib sheet for you here. There are others, but these, in my opinion, are the most important, especially when it comes to cheer. So number 1, our training effect, or supercompensation. It's a long word. What this is we start at a point. When we train, we stress the body out, so the body goes below that point. Okay, imagine the threshold is where my elbow is. So we go below that threshold. Then, after rest and recovery, we rise back from that threshold, and we are actually at a point higher than where we were before. So what this refers to is how our body adapts to a stimulus given at any point, okay? So the idea is we supercompensate. We don't just compensate for it and go back from starting, elbows to threshold. We don't just come back to the starting point. We get higher, we get better, we adapt. Okay? In order to adapt, though, it has to be a significant stress or stimulus. Otherwise, it's never going to get us anywhere. Okay? Which brings me on to our next principle, progressive overload. Those who go to the gym may already know these concepts. Some of you may be versed in anatomy, physiology, an exercise-based degree, and you may already know these things. Good, excellent. Talk to me about them. Talk to fellow coaches. Share your knowledge. Progressive overload. Progressive overload is the idea that something needs to get harder over time. It doesn't mean heavier, harder over time. If you were to do 5 push-ups a day and your aim was to get to 10 push-ups a day and you just kept doing 5, you'd take a very long time to get to 10. We all know this because we have to have our athletes push themselves harder. We say, push yourself now, reap the benefits later. We give them slightly harder things to do. We start simple, we build up. That's progressive overload in a manner of speaking. So if you wanted to get to those 10 press-ups, a more efficient way would maybe be, for 1 week I'm going to do 5 press-ups, then I'm going to do 6 a day, then I'm going to do 7 a day. See how we're making things harder over time? The body will then adapt the training effect and we will get better. We will become more efficient, we'll become stronger or better at a press-up. Okay? So it all starts to connect at the very beginning. Now, the next principle said specific adaptations to imposed demands. Now, what that refers to, again, it's another bunch of words, and it kind of looks like, for the British coaches out there, an episode of Countdown. Okay, can I have a consonant? Can I have a vowel, please, Carol? Although it's Rachel now. Anyway, sorry, I won't keep going with that one. Said, specific adaptations to impose demands. What that means is your body will adapt to the demands that it is given. Okay? So if you keep doing press-ups, your body will adapt and get better at press-ups. But we don't do press-ups in cheer, do we? If you keep doing preps, your body will adapt from crunch, gut, whatever you call it, to prep. Your body will adapt to this movement. If you do enough of it and you create a training effect through progressively overloading the movement, add a flyer, add a weight plate, do a front squat if we were. That's what I recommend if we were to talk about a weighted movement version of something specific to cheer. So if we did front squats with our bar, our body will adapt to that movement, and it looks a lot like moving through a prep, doesn't it? A front squat could be considered a specific movement pattern for cheer, and doing enough of them will create a specific adaptation to the specific demands we've imposed on the body. Okay? So if your athlete's not great at a back handspring, you're not going to have that athlete do 50 press-ups every time, are you? Because it's not specific to a back handspring. You'll give them drills, you'll give them movements, because you want their body to adapt to a specific demand, parts of a back handspring, and then adapt. Are we starting to see a familiar trend here? We already use this. We already do said principles. We just didn't call it that. And we didn't plan for it, like we've said in strength and conditioning already. Specific adaptations to impose demands. We can use that. We can progressively overload those demands to create a training effect, and we can plan for that in the long term to make our athletes get better over time and eventually peak at a certain point at the end of our macro cycle, for example at Worlds or NCA or cheer sports or nationals, whatever your competition is. At the bottom we have ramp, raise, activate, mobilize, potentiate. That's what that stands for. Now, again, a lot of you may have heard of this already. It refers to our warm-ups. Does your warm-up raise the heart rate, raise the body temperature, activate the muscles, mobilize the joints, and potentiate the nervous system? Now, to be honest, if you warm up, you will be doing a certain degree of that, but is your warm-up specific, like we've already covered? Is it raising the heart rate to a specific point, to the correct point for cheer? Is it activating the correct muscles? Okay. Is it mobilizing the correct joints? Is it potentiating the nervous system, i.e. getting the body to ready, the brain ready to move in a very specific way? Is it all cheer specific? Or are you just going, we're going to star jump round in a circle for 50 seconds and then we're going to get stuck straight in? So in the Google Drive link that should be in the information below this or in the comments, there will be a video of the warm-up that we do at Rising Stars. We do the same warm-up, not for all of our cheerleading sessions. Tumble sessions are separate. We do the same warm-up because not only do we want to use it, we want to progressively overload that warm-up, we want to use the SAID principle to get specific adaptations to specific demands, and we want a training effect from it. So you don't have to worry. I know a lot of people demonise using the same warm-up, but we're doing similar motions every time. So it works. Again, tumble notwithstanding. And that warm-up raises, activates, mobilises and potentiates the correct muscles and body parts and nervous connections we need for cheerleading. Now, I have no hard and fast figures for you coaches, but I can confidently say the incidence of injury has gone down since we've gone specific with our warm-up, since we've started putting more into our warm-up, okay? Get creative, okay, but also get smart. Be a modern coach. Think about what you can do to make the most of your warm-up and so your athletes can get something out of it. One of the things I like to encourage coaches to do is to add the workout into the warm-up. Not only do you get a lot of bang for your buck in terms of ramp and SAID, but it's also out of the way, so you have more time to do the things that you need to do in session, okay? So they are some of the key principles, and I hope that you can understand how they connect to periodization and to the core of what S&C really is. Now, practical applications for cheer. Hands up, who wants to find out why strength conditioning can literally help you do things in cheerleading better? If you put your hand up, good for you. Also, it's kind of funny because no one can see you. Anyway, improve stunt execution. I want better stunt execution. Higher jumps. Yeah, yes, please. Coordination, better coordinated athletes. Yes, please. We've all got those athletes that, you know, struggle with how they're manipulating stunts, or struggle in their back handspring to keep their feet together, or coordinate their body when they're dancing. If we could think of ways to improve that, or if I could give you tools to improve that, would you ignore them or would you take them? It's a stupid question, isn't it? Okay, stunt execution. If your athletes can hold a stunt for longer, can lift a stunt easier, can move under load in a specific pattern better, do you think that's going to contribute to your stunt execution? Hell yes. If your athlete can press more overhead, or in terms of conditioning, can do it more times, i.e. work capacity. So work capacity is another word that we're going to hear a lot today, and that refers to the ability to go through a movement pattern under stress over and over and over again, and that's very important in cheerleading. But if we can do those things multiple times, we're going to be able to execute the stunt better, because we're going to be stronger, we're going to be fitter, we're going to be more coordinated, and we're going to be used to that movement, and our body is going to go through the SAID principle, which we covered before. It's going to adapt to that specific demand. Are we starting to get an idea of what we can use here, coaches, and how we can put these things in place already? We don't need a gym full of equipment. Increase jump height. If your athlete can, their vertical jump gets better, is their jump's going to get better? Of course they are. If your athlete can lift their leg higher, straight, or their jump's shape's going to get better? Of course they are. Okay? If your athlete can hold their leg there for longer, or the jump's shape's going to be better executed? Of course they are. Okay? If your athlete can jump 50 times and not lose the quality, are they going to improve their execution? Of course they are. It's important that we bear in mind when we talk about S&C. Big S for strength and a big C for conditioning, not big S, little c, which is often what some coaches tend to lean towards. We have to condition the body systems, the aerobic, the anaerobic, the creatine phosphate, okay? You don't need to know much more about them, okay? They are the body systems that we use. Condition those body systems. In cheer, we tend to use all three, but the majority of a routine, in case you're interested, falls into aerobic because we complete it in the presence of oxygen. It may feel like a sprint, but we are breathing as we go through it. There are elements of all three systems, but we're not going to delve into too much detail. All you need to know is you have to condition those systems as well as strengthening the body. So back to increasing jump height. If we can do it more and we can do it better, it's going to convert, providing we are specific, into our cheerleading routine, coaches. And that is exactly what we want. Coordination, okay? The athlete that can't try and get their wrists together in a prep or an extension. The athlete that doesn't know where their feet are going when they're moving around in a stunt, okay? The athlete that isn't quite sure how to complete the drill because they're not coordinated. If we train their bodies and encourage them to train multiple movement patterns over and over and over and over again, the athlete's going to become more coordinated as well as stronger. Again, it goes back to the SAID principle. If you want someone to get better at something, you need to specifically work that. So coordination, let's think about tumble drills, stunt drills, movement drills. One of my big mantras is that we need to make sure we are building the body, we are drilling the movement, and then performing the skill. It's really important that it goes in that order because it contributes to all these different things in that specific way. And then we can take that, using that principle, and make it specific to cheerleading. More practical applications. Aren't I good to you, coaches? Makes better body positions easier. I'm talking about flyers, stretches in the air. Flexibility is great, and a useful tool to look at is flexibility research on Instagram, a gentleman called Dan Van Zandt. He is a wizard when it comes to flexibility. But flexibility goes hand in hand with strength. Great, you've got flyers that can do all the splits, but their heel stretches look like a dog's dinner. Have you considered that trying to lift your leg requires strength in these muscles here? Try it now. Lift your leg and feel those muscles work. They're only very small muscles, so they need to be very strong. What about back stretches? Glutes, lower back, hamstrings. For athletes, arms, shoulders, back for bow and arrows, for our back stretches. If our athletes aren't strong in what they're trying to use to pull the stretch, how are they going to utilize the flexibility that they've got? The answer is they're not, coaches, okay? It's got to go hand in hand. So the stronger and more conditioned our athletes are, the more efficient they'll be at pulling those body positions, holding those body positions, and utilizing the flexibility that they've worked on, okay? Power for tumbles. That's a massive one, isn't it, guys? Okay? If we can generate more power through specific movements that translate to tumble, our tumbles will become more powerful. And of course, power, speed, and force, we want it to be faster. We want it to generate more force, so power goes up. If those two go up, our power goes up, and our tumbles go faster. They go higher. It gives us more time. It makes it look better, okay? It satisfies drivers on the score sheet. A big one for tumble, you see a lot, is the hinge movement, which is the isolation of the hip, okay? For those of you that go to the gym, I, at Triforce Cheer, recommend a Romanian deadlift or an RDL. Load that hinge, work on the coordination of that hinging movement. Make the muscles that make it happen, hamstrings, glutes, hip flexors. Make those muscles stronger, and that movement pattern, that hinge, will work better for you, and you can then develop more force faster, so you get powerful through that movement. And can we see how that's going to translate into our tumbles and our jumps when we want to move those hips forwards? Or if we go back to coordination, when we want our flyers to fly with their hips forwards, not sticking their bum out, if they get confident and competent using those basic movement patterns, they're going to translate into cheer, into that flyer's life, into that athlete's life, okay? It creates more force for baskets and cradles. This is a really big one. Travis Pryor, who is a director of BCA, a good friend of mine, he often talks about how cradles and baskets don't go high enough. Because it's on the score sheet, isn't it? We want them to go higher because they look better, and judges should, in theory, score you higher if the baskets and cradles go higher. But have we considered the principles behind how they go higher? How we generate the force in a basket or in a cradle or from the top? What muscles do we use? Do we have the work capacity to be able to do those regular reps to create that training effect and progressively overload that training effect, using the SAID principle to create specific adaptations? Can you see where this is all going? Okay? So, if we can increase the force and coordination of this movement through developing strength and coordination through maybe an upright row, does that look familiar? Or maybe through a bent over row, so we strengthen the muscles in the correct places. We build work capacity in those muscles. Can we see how we can then translate that into cheerleading? So on that note, I want you guys to think about movement patterns in cheer. What we have is 5 specific movement patterns that I believe are very specific to cheer. In strength and conditioning, there are more, and a lot of people chop and change them for their sport. But I believe the 5 top movement patterns in cheer are a squat, so knee dominant squats, hinge, which is hip dominant, pull, which is this elbow and shoulder dominant for our back, press, which is shoulder dominant, which is for developing like handstands and pike push-ups, and then carry, which is great for developing full body tension and work capacity. So again, that's squat, hinge, press, pull, and carry. My Instagram has more information on these movements. It's still early days, but if you come and follow me, I guarantee you'll get something out of it. And you can help me learn as well if you've got other approaches. Now, if we can generate more force in a given movement, we can move a load further or higher or faster, i.e. flyer in a basket, going up faster, going up higher, okay? And we can use basic principles of strength conditioning in order to do this. And it's really simple to incorporate them. You don't need a gym full of equipment, okay? You can use a bag with a weight in for these rows, for pressing overhead. You can use I, Y, and T movements to build the upper back, okay? You can even add a W in, elbows tucked in, and it's all about squeezing the shoulder blades because that's what the back muscles help manipulate in a large part, okay? Again, information about these exercises and ways you can utilize them are going to be on my Instagram, and I'm going to include videos in that link, in that Google Drive file, for exercises you can do with almost no equipment, which will get you bang for your buck and help you get the specific cheer adaptations, okay? Because the better our athletes become through strength conditioning, the better our sport becomes through strength and conditioning, and the more competitive it becomes. And we want it to be more competitive because we want it taken more seriously, and we want to go to the Olympics and do well, no matter where your nation is. Now, here's a bit of fun. Why is wrestling better for cheerleading than, can you see what it is? Burpees. We all done it, coaches. One of the least cheer-specific movements that has ever existed, the burpee. We all dish them out. And part of the reason why a lot of our athletes have a poor relationship with strength and conditioning or exercise in general is because we use it as a punishment. So let's get smart, coaches, let's get modern, and let's stop using it as a punishment. Let's use it as a method for them to develop, okay? Flyer doesn't have her hips over her toes, go and do hip thrusts, glute bridges, okay? Go and do some hinge movements. Get them to understand how it feels and get strong in that movement, build work capacity, and over time, they'll understand, okay, that's how my body moves. That's how I get my hips over my toes. Okay? Now, back to this slide. Wrestling versus burpees. Wrestling, this is from another good friend of mine, Big G Tumble. If you don't already know who he is, he's a tumble coach in the UK and also at Crimson Heat cheerleading team. Now, he showed me this at a camp and I love it. It's brilliant because it's teamwork, it gets team morale up, and it also creates specific types of work. Now, before we go into this, I want to quickly touch on 3 points. Concentric, eccentric, and isometric. Some long words, I know, so let me break it down for you. Concentric, if we're talking about my biceps, is where the muscle contracts and shortens. Eccentric is where the muscle contracts and lengthens. And isometric is where the muscle contracts and doesn't move. So, let's talk about holding a prep. There's some isometrics going on there, aren't there? Okay? If we stand up, there's some concentrics, muscles shortening, lifting weight. And if we lower that prep, there's some eccentric, lowering the weight, stretching those muscles out whilst keeping them contracted. So it's important to bear in mind we understand the importance of eccentric, isometric, and concentric. The reason why is wrestling can give us the movements with resistance, which is how we can progressively overload things, without needing any equipment. Here's the example. Athlete 1 lies flat, on the floor, on their back, arms up by their ears. Their aim is to get into a tuck shape, okay? So get into that tuck shape. You can put your arms wherever you want, okay? Whatever your tuck shape is, whether it's open or closed. Athlete 2 is next to athlete 1. And they are going to try and stop that athlete getting into the tuck shape. And it turned into a bit of a wrestling match. What we get is, we get resistance through the movement. Now, a lot of athletes struggle with a tuck shape, or they need to get better at making a tuck shape. So why don't we have them have to work that movement under stress? So it creates a demand. And then they're going to adapt to that, aren't they? They're going to get better at it. So this athlete's going to lie down flat. The other athlete's going to try and hold their legs and arms down, and that athlete's going to try and close into the tuck shape. So they have to work on that concentric movement, use those muscles to lift that weight, close that shape over, and we've managed to resist it. So we're going to get progressive overload, which is going to give us a training effect, and the athletes will get stronger in that movement. They will get more aware in that movement. They will get better at that movement because we're wrestling instead of doing burpees, coaches. There are tons of ways we can do this. Another one is have athlete 1 in a tuck shape. Now athlete 2 needs to break them out of that tuck shape. Again, the athlete is isometrically contracting, so they're getting used to working the muscles that hold the tuck shape. Again, it's going to help them learn how to get into the tuck shape in the first wrestling match, hold the tuck shape in the second wrestling match. And we can do this with other shapes. Get creative, coaches, okay? But that is why wrestling is more specific for cheerleading than burpees, because we can alter it, we can change it, we can manipulate how it happens in order to get what we want out of it, okay? So, moving swiftly on. It's a quiz time. Love a good quiz. It's because I'm British, okay? Love a good quiz. Now, the only thing is, unfortunately, because we're not live, I can't actually quiz you, so I'm sorry about that, guys. But should we have a go anyway? What do the next 4 images have in common, guys? Can anyone tell me? Here we go. I'll give you a second. I'm going to have another drink. Have a think. What do they have in common? Can you tell what it is yet? Sorry, that was my Steve Irwin impression. Sorry if there's any Aussies watching and I've just offended you. They are all ways we can use strength conditioning in cheerleading. We've got hopscotch, we've got hiding the broccoli, we've got slowing down, and we've got CrossFit. I'm going to break them down for you because you're probably like, what the hell? I did not expect to see these 4 images on a Sunday afternoon at a cheerleading conference. Hopscotch. Remember we spoke about work capacity? Hopscotch, hopping side to side, 2 feet, 1 feet. It builds work capacity in the ankles. It builds work capacity in the calves and the shins. And the ankle is one of the areas where I tend to see a lot of injuries in cheer. I'm no physio or doctor, but I do see a lot of injuries there. So if we can build up the strength in that area through a specific movement, we use our toes when we rebound in tumbles, okay, when we explode in jumps. If we can build work capacity in that area, why wouldn't we? Not only will hopscotch build that work capacity, it'll also strengthen and stabilise the area because we can take it through different planes of movement, forwards and backwards, side to side, and rotation. And it'll strengthen it to stop unwanted movement happening at that joint, which is what we can do with every joint. Elbows, shoulders, knees, hips, okay, at the neck. If we get smart with the way we work, and we get smart with the way we utilise S&C, we can reduce the incidence of injury and increase the performance of our athletes at the same time. So, hopscotch. Hopscotch is great. Have them hopping forwards, backwards, side to side, like I said before. Build up the strength in the ankles, build up the stability, build up the resilience in the tissue around the ankle in order to help reduce the incidence of injury and create a stronger joint. Hiding the broccoli. I don't mind broccoli, but a lot of kids don't like broccoli. A lot of athletes don't like broccoli, okay? So, what you tend to do, or what parents do, in my experience, is they hide it. They put it in a pie, or they mince it up real fine, or they turn it into rice, or whatever it is that we do these days with vegetables, okay? If you can hide that broccoli, i.e. strength and conditioning, it doesn't matter if they've got a good or bad relationship with it. For example, box jumps in tumble drills, working on height, that's considered strength conditioning, but as far as they're concerned, they're working on their tumbles. Extra reps when you're stunting, from crunch to prep, from crunch to prep. That's strengthening the movement, the legs, that's creating specific adaptations to the demands of the movement, isn't it? Right? And it's strength and conditioning because of the way we're doing it, because we've programmed it, we've periodized it over time, we've got a plan of how we're going to use it. That's hiding the broccoli, guys. Handstands, holds, handstand wall walks are a perfect example. Feet on the wall, hands out, keep your legs straight, walk it back. To the unassuming eye, that's just handstand work, tumble drills, but it's also strength and conditioning because we're going through those movement patterns and we're building work capacity as well as strength, and we're progressively overloading it if we change it over time to make it harder so the body adapts. Okay, can we see why hiding the broccoli, if our athletes don't like exercise or conditioning for whatever reason, is a great way of keeping it going? Slow down. Whatever you already do, coaches, next time you're in the gym, slow it down. Slowing it down makes it harder. We all know that, okay? A slow squat is harder than a fast squat. For example, if I went squat like this and back up nice and slow, That's harder than, we all know that. So if we slow it down, it creates more demand on the muscles and the body in that movement pattern. So we get more out of it, because if we slow it down and makes it harder, we're progressively overloading it. So start with a 3 second down, 1 second up. 3 seconds down, 2 seconds up. 3 seconds down, 3 seconds up. Build it up over time. Will build your work capacity of your athletes. Will build the strength and coordination in the movement. And it will also make them better at squatting, better at hinging. Whatever it is that they're doing, they will get better at it. So be smart with your movements. But if you don't have tons of equipment, slow your movements down. Slow press-ups, slow rows, get into a handstand against the wall and have them slowly lower themselves to the floor. If they struggle with that, add a mat underneath so they don't have as far to go. Then a lower mat, then to the floor and have them fall. Then have them build on pushing themselves back up or holding at certain stages. Get creative. Can you see how we can create those principles of SAID, specific adaptations, and the progressive overload without actually having to do very much at all? We can start using S&C right now and reap the benefits of it. Finally, don't judge me guys, but CrossFit. CrossFit has tons and tons going on for it. One of the reasons why I like it is we can use their WOD style workout of the day, in order to help better and more efficiently tax our athletes' bodies. For example, 2.5 minutes. I wonder why I said 2.5 minutes. Funny that, isn't it? 2.5 minutes, you've got 10 exercises to do, certain number of reps of each. Obviously those exercises, because we're modern coaches who've learned all about strength and conditioning, those exercises are going to be cheer specific movements. Once you've done those 10, you rest. What if you finish at 2 minutes? Well, you've got 30 seconds rest and the whole thing starts again. It allows you to scale the workout, because different people can work at different levels. You can have your advanced athletes like they have in CrossFit, RX, or you can scale it for your athletes that aren't going to get there, like they have in CrossFit. As long as you are creative, you are logical, and you are smart about what you're doing, CrossFit style workouts can be a massive abundance of resources for what you want to do in your gym. So, hopscotch, hiding broccoli, slowing down, and doing CrossFit are all different ways we can use S&C in cheerleading. And again, I bet you never expected to hear that today, did you? If you want to know more about different ways we can do it, come and talk to me. Go and speak to a strength conditioning coach. Like I said before, if you're not great with the exercise, the conditioning, the strength, the workout kind of stuff, get a strength conditioning coach in. You do it with choreo, you do it with tumble, you do it with dance, you do it with business if you're not great at business. So why not with strength conditioning? The way I see it is programs are starting to pick up on strength conditioning, starting to pick up on systemized training, periodization, the principles of S&C. Do you want to get left behind because you're not using it, because you're not good at it? That's not the right mentality. We wouldn't tell our athletes, you're not good at it, so don't bother. So let's get better together. Talk to me in the comments, leave me some questions, reach out on my Instagram or the email, which will be at the end, okay? If we can use these principles and strength conditioning properly, by the time our sport gets to the Olympics, which will be soon, we are going to be in a much better place. Stronger athletes, more conditioned athletes, better work capacity in our athletes, more resilience. More on that next. So, COVID. It's ruined a lot of stuff, hasn't it? It's been a real hard time. However, we could not prevent injuries before COVID, and we still can't prevent them now. That is my opinion, but I believe it to be true. Of course I do. You can reduce the incidence of injuries, but you can't prevent them. You cannot completely prevent injuries from happening. It's just not done. But if we can reduce the incidence of them, it means we can then train for longer, and if we can train for longer, we can get more out of our athletes. Classic example is British cycling. They had a seat at a normal height, a normal angle, and 90% of the athletes got saddle sores. So they're in pain, so they couldn't train. The genius, I can't remember the name, who was part of the Olympic performance program, changed the angle of the seat. Once that changed, there was a 60% decrease in the incidence of saddle sores. So they could train for longer, which meant they could get more progressive overload in and more training effect, more specific adaptations to those extra demands. Does that not sound like a brilliant way to go? If you're smart about it, you can train for longer, and training for longer means you can get more out of your athletes. So we can reduce the incidence of injuries, but we can't prevent them. So surely that sounds like a great idea. Strengthen and stabilise joints. Strengthen and stabilise areas of the body of weakness. If your athlete walks around like this, then we need to strengthen the muscles in the back. We need to stretch the chest. If we've got an athlete that's constantly got an arch back, we need to strengthen the muscles in our lower back. And we need to stretch the muscles here in our hip flexors. There are tons of different scenarios where we can use strength and conditioning to improve not only our athletes' well-being, but their efficiency of movement in cheerleading. Funny how this connects back to the start, isn't it? And we can also at the same time build up the resilience of those joints and of those athletes through increasing work capacity and increasing the way they move and the way that they act towards strength and conditioning. Now, resilience refers to the amount of a beating something can take, basically. So if we do a lot of hopscotch, our ankles will take more of a beating, okay? We want them to be able to take a beating because, take the knee for example, the knee is a hinge joint, forwards and backwards, but you get a little bit of play from side to, I know it's coming from my hip, but you get a bit of play side to side, okay? Now, that side to side is a little bit okay, but we don't want loads, we don't want unwanted movement there, right? So to reduce the unwanted movement, what we do is we strengthen that joint, so we get less likely to have a tear of a major tendon, okay? Strengthening and stabilising joints is one of the best ways we can go about not only improving our athletes' longevity, but improving their life after cheer. Making sure they don't have dodgy knees, dodgy elbows and all that stuff, okay? So don't think about trying to prevent injuries, think about ways you can reduce the incidence of them by using cheer-specific movements to strengthen and condition the body, build work capacity, remember what that was? The ability to do more under a given load or through a given movement pattern, okay? Force multipliers. A lot of movements in cheer are force multiplier. Baskets, cradles, tumbling. Now, a lot of the literature has a lot of different numbers for this, so I'm going to be brief. The lowest number I've seen is 3, and the highest I've seen is 21. So we're just going to float in between that. These numbers refer to the amount of force that travels through the joints of the ankle, knee and hip when landing a round-off flick tuck or round-off back handspring, back somersault. Imagine that. At the minimum end of the scale, 3 times your body weight goes through those joints. And if you've never strengthened, conditioned or built up those joints, how are they going to withstand that kind of force? Imagine if it was 10. And bear in mind, in a training session, our athletes don't just do it once. They do it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and we wonder why we get injuries. Because we're not taking the well-being of the joints. We're not taking into account the physics of the process, or just how much of a beating the body takes through tumbling, through catching baskets, through catching cradles. Okay? I remember a while ago there was a video that did the rounds saying that catching a kick double basket has the equivalent force of a professional NFL linebacker hitting someone at full tilt. That is an insane amount of force, and we're going to let the lower back take that, or the knees, without having given them any strengthening, without any formal education on training those joints. The numbers are wide, and the science and the literature around it covers a whole broad spectrum. I'm not trying to give you a hard and fast scientific answer to the way the forces work in the body, okay? But these numbers are in the literature. You can find them. You can Google them if you want. We know that these movements multiply the forces because of the way they work and the way physics works. So if we are multiplying forces, we need to make sure we are working on the strength of the body and the strength of the joints. okay? Because next time you send your athlete back for the 5th time to that round off back handspring tuck, you're probably going to be thinking, oh, I wish I'd worked on some squat technique, or maybe some hinges, develop the muscles around that joint. So, nearly there now, guys. Long-term athlete development. This is a broad spectrum of information and processes in terms of how you get your athletes from A to B. The idea behind this is that we start young. However young is up to you. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who believe there is specific ages we should start at. However, before we get into that, it's important to bear in mind that kids from whatever age are running, they're jumping, they're climbing, they're lifting. They're doing all these things already, so why people balk at the idea of them doing more of that in a structured manner is alien to me, okay? We can just hide the broccoli. Okay, you want to run and jump? Well, run and jump onto that block, or run and jump off it onto that crash mat. It's incorporating basic strength and conditioning principles into something that they really enjoy. Stronger muscles require less effort to perform the same task. If I can bicep curl 40 kilos, 10 is going to take a lot less effort, isn't it? So if our athletes get stronger through a specific movement, okay, so they can front squat 80 kilos, for example, that's a really good front squat, then they're not going to struggle when they have to dip with their 40, 50 kilo flyer, are they? Especially when they share it with another base. So think about that when you build up strength. Again, you don't need weight to do it. You can progressively overload through movement, through holds, through slowing down the movement. Eccentrics, remember them? Isometrics, holding the movements. If we introduce athletes to S&C from a very young age, it becomes part of their process. It becomes part of how they train and who they are. So they don't have a bad relationship with it, and we can then utilise it to our advantage later on. All the good stuff that we've covered in this talk, in this topic today, we can introduce from a young age. We've just got to be smart about it. And again, if you don't know how to do it, speak to an S&C coach. Get someone on board who can help you if you feel swamped by all the information. But get kids introduced to it from a young age, okay? Okay, go and pick up that block and then put the block down over there. That's basically a deadlift or squat, okay? Think about ways you can make it enjoyable for them, and we can get so much more out of it. For example, you know how I mentioned carry was one of the key movement patterns for cheer? Tell your athletes, okay, pick your mate up and run over there with them, or walk over there. Next time you're in the gym, pick somebody up, or even someone you live with, pick them up and tell me that's an easy thing to do. Think about all the tension you have to put through your entire body when you pick somebody up. It's a great way to develop work capacity and understand how to create tension in the body. And we can make it fun as well. Piggyback carries, piggyback squats. Use the people around you as resistance. And you'll be surprised how quickly you can make a difference through the principles we covered earlier on. Well-trained athletes have better proprioception. Proprioception is simply how a movement feels in a given space and time. And if our athletes can feel a movement better, they can do a movement better. Stronger athletes have more body awareness. Body awareness is a great thing. We've all seen the people who've got really good body awareness, and we want more of that. So our athletes can move better, have better proprioception, understand what their body's doing, because then they can fix it quicker. They can understand the corrections in a more efficient manner, so we're not there talking at them forever. Also, body awareness and body confidence. There's another pandemic that we're not speaking about, and it's the majority of our female athletes worldwide who struggle with body confidence. If we can get them confident with the way their body moves and what their body is capable of, why wouldn't we do that? Great if for one girl it means being able to deadlift 80 kilos, for someone else it means being able to run a mile. Strength conditioning can play into that and improve their confidence. And that's not just females, that's male athletes as well. So why would we not take advantage of that? Cheer specific conditioning, being able to go for 2.5 minutes, use the correct energy systems, work capacity in joints and in movement patterns. Strength conditioning can give us those things and help our athletes develop in the long term because they understand those principles. They understand that's why their body can do what their body can do and how their body can do it. Long-term athlete development should be beyond the sport. It should be for them overall, for them throughout their life. Moving well, being able to lift a weight, being pain-free, okay? Being able to understand how to manipulate their body within a given environment, okay? It should be a lifetime goal, not just something we see as an advantage in cheerleading. But cheer-specific conditioning is vital, because without a well-conditioned body, you're not going to get through that 2.5-minute routine with high quality execution of any element. Okay? Now, last but not least, the takeaway. Thank you for listening. Thank you, Kenny and Lisa, for the vote of confidence, and I hope you've learned something. Hit me up in the comments. Find me on Instagram, Triforce Cheer. Email me, talk to me. I would love to hear your views and what you thought about this talk, okay? If you want my help, get in touch, engage my services. That's what we're here for. I want strength and conditioning to become the latest tool in your arsenal for making your athletes the best they can be, making our sport the best it can be, okay? Let's get competitive, let's get taken seriously, let's get to the Olympics and let's smash it out the park. But we need to build our athletes. Short-term, long-term, strength, conditioning, specific adaptations, everything we've discussed today. So, in the information will be a link to a Google Drive where there will be exercise videos, workouts, and troubleshooting and guide videos, all for free, for you guys to get started. All of them will use little to no equipment, okay? Get a bag with weight in for your rows, for your upright rows, for your presses. Do handstands, slow, fast. Vary the tempo of your exercises. Add pauses into any and all exercises you do. If you struggle to work the back muscles, use these. I, Y, T, and W. Believe me, adding holds and tempo into those movements will torch the upper back muscles, which is vital for cheerleading, okay? Get that information from the Google Drive link. Hit me up on social media if you need help or if you want to talk about strength and conditioning. But thank you from the bottom of my heart for watching today's talk. And I really hope you've learned something and you can get involved with strength and conditioning for you, your athletes, and our sport. Thank you very much. Have a really good day. And I'm hoping I'll hear from you soon. Bye-bye.